Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 266 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, jaysfromthecouch.com. We're so glad you tuned in for another episode. Whether you're watching our live stream on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, we really appreciate the views and the following. And don't forget, if you're watching on those venues, you can also add your 2 cents or 3 if you wish, ask a question and so on. And you might want to get ready with that because we've got a great episode for you this week. And don't forget, of course, the audio version of our podcast available on everywhere. I'm not going to go through the list. Look for podcasts. You'll find us. And I'm your host, as always, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. We've got a great episode for you. We've got Keegan Matheson of MLB.com back for another episode. We're going to pick his brain, talk everything Blue Jays. Right now, he's currently enjoying the open bar in the green room. And I'm going to get him on here as quick as possible because it ain't cheap. But to help me do all of this, I've got host Sunny Side of the Dome on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Karen Suter. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Sean.
And host of the On Feck Circle, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the Feckless Wonder himself, Steve Feck. Good evening.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Steve.
And not that I'm not happy to see you both, but we'll bring in the real important guest here, MLB.com's Keegan Matheson, joining us from his lovely studios in an undisclosed location, probably right next door to George Springer, of course. Keegan, thanks for joining us. How you doing, bud?
Doing very well, yeah. It's all about angling. I mean, my fridge is right here. You know, this is still Toronto. My fridge is right here. If I reach out this arm, I can probably touch my bed. But it's if the last year and a half has taught me anything, it's about creative backgrounding, I think.
Oh, absolutely. You gotta go, right? You got to do what you got to do. Yeah. So Keegan, it's been a while. I believe we chatted maybe just before the season started. We had you on, and it feels like forever ago. But here we are. Fast forward, we're at the All-Star break, and the Blue Jays are they're in it, but they're not in it. Right. So I guess my first question to you is, what do you make of this team? Are they a playoff team? Are they playing better than their record? Like, what's going on here?
They are really caught in the middle. I'm a believer that you are what your record says you are. It's the only way we measure teams. It's how teams get into the playoffs. So that's all that matters, really. And it's, teams that say they are better than their record, well, that just means you're out of the playoffs right now. Those are the teams that say that. So the Blue Jays, what we're seeing right now is how much roster construction matters in baseball. Now, if this were the NBA and you have 4 All-Stars, well, you're going to win the championship. You can be top-heavy and do that. In Major League Baseball, you are seeing how the bottom 3 or 4 spots on that roster, which bullpen for the Blue Jays, can really bring that down and can drag down the rest of a roster right now. So regardless of how good this lineup is, it's just over and over again, you see how one weakness, the weakest link, can falter that. Because good teams like the Rays tend to tell the truth about the Blue Jays every time they see them. Good teams like the Rays find that weakness every single time, and the Blue Jays are allowing that to happen. So they're stuck in the middle in terms of, they might be a move or two away from a real run. We haven't even really seen a run from them this year. There was a 5 or 6 game win streak, but not that real defining 10-gamer that most playoff teams need. But despite the talent, I mean, even a week or two ago, it was reasonable to look at this team and say, well, man, what if they dip under 500? What's the conversation then, right? So they're more talented than their record, but they are their record.
Right. And so do you see that big move run happening in the next couple of weeks here?
It's going to be interesting to see these couple of series out of the break. I think that the Blue Jays are a team that should be going in at the deadline regardless, even if they stumble out of this break, because nothing the Blue Jays will be doing, or at least their main focus, won't be just classic rentals. Let's get an old guy on an expiring contract. The Blue Jays have the financial flexibility where they should be adding multi-year guys. They should be using money as a strength in trades. So that should be beneficial for them. I think that they should be in ad mode regardless, really take advantage of teams who are down and out. But they do need that run. And the rotation is kind of there. It's a little better than I thought it would be at this point of the year. The lineup is good enough. They just need to make it work all together. And it seems like when you're watching the Blue Jays, there's a few different pieces moving, but it's kind of individual. Not individual players, but just the bullpen and starting pitching and lineup don't seem to be in sync. Mm-hmm. So they need to get that together. They need to stop booting the ball around, which has gotten better than last year, but that's still a low bar. So a lot to improve on, a lot to improve.
Right. Hi, Keegan. So one thing I'm wondering about, so as we know, this past off season, the Blue Jays made a number of moves. A lot of them were bringing in guys on one-year deals, and a couple of them, to me, really stand out. Robbie Ray and Marcus Semien, they have both done outstanding work. But they're both eligible for free agency at the end of this season. What do you think the chances are of one or maybe both continuing to be in Blue Jays uniforms come 2022? And if you had to choose only one, which do you think is more likely?
Ooh, good question. When you look at Semien, has really won this bet on himself. Brilliant by him. His agent is probably exhaling month after month with how that worked out. That was risky. He could have come in and flopped again, but he's nailed it. He's been fantastic. And then with Robbie Ray, that signing, I still remember the last November, December, the Blue Jays came out and said, we need to improve our strike throwing. And then the first thing they did was sign the dude who led the planet in walks. And I'm not going to rewrite history. I looked at that and thought, what the hell? You know, I know it will get better. Obviously, he's not going to be that bad. But even if he were getting back to that 4.5, 5 walks per 9 type of pitcher, that's still not what you're looking at. And he has just been one of the stories of the season for me. I know Vladdy has always outshined him, or there's been another story, but Robbie Ray is just fascinating to me because he just decided to stop walking people, which doesn't make sense. You know, it's amazing. So when you look at them, I think the Blue Jays' decision would come down to, well, money, obviously, but in terms of what they have coming up through the pipeline as well. Now, on the pitching side, of course, you can never have enough, yada, yada, that old saying, and this season has certainly showed that. I thought pitching depth would be a strength of the Blue Jays, down through Pearson and Hatch, on and on. It really hasn't turned out that way. I thought they were okay 8 or 9 deep. Hasn't been. And then in the infield, you're looking at guys like Jordan Groshans, Austin Martin coming up to the system. They're not second basemen, but baseball's moving in a direction where, you know, second, third, and short. If you have 3 guys there, there's a way to make it work. So I do believe that, and then you're projecting forward as well. Is Robbie Ray going to sustain this? And how are these players going to age? I do think Marcus Semien fits this team so well. And I would be more comfortable saying that not even 22, but the 2023 and 24 versions of Marcus Semien, I would be a little more inclined to bet on those. What Robbie Ray's done is just fantastic, but we all know the nature of these high-velocity arms, and we've seen just from last year to this year. Now, will hitters make an adjustment on that? Will he lose the zone again? We'll see. Somebody's going to give him a ton of money, but I at least think that Semien is a bit of a safer bet. It's just a matter of term because he's going to be looking for a lot of years, and he's definitely fit this clubhouse as well, very much.
Good to know. Thanks.
Well, hey, Keegan, first-time caller, long-time listener. I'm fascinated by this Gunnar Hoagland pick, not just because of what his upside is, but and you're much more connected than we mere podcasters are. But is this pick basically telling the fan base, we think we already have pieces in place right now from the offensive end that we can move up, and you referenced them earlier, that we can afford to gamble our first round pick, especially without a second round pick, to back it up, on a guy that's probably not going to pitch again until 2023?
A little bit. I think that's tied a little bit. The MLB draft is so unique. You know, if this were if this were football and the Blue Jays were picking a quarterback who had a blown ACL yesterday, you'd be saying, whoa, you better be awfully confident with what you've got this year. But I think with Hoagland, given how advanced he is as a college pitcher, I think that timeline can still be fairly tight. Now, if this was a high school guy coming off of Tommy John, then you're saying, man, well, I'll see you in, 6 years? I'll try to remember this name. But with Hoagland, I think the thing that the Blue Jays find encouraging about him is his control, especially on his fastball, because when you project guys coming back from Tommy John, sometimes that feel or the control right around the edges can be one of the slower things to come back. So they're thinking, and speaking to Shane Farrell, who runs their draft, their thinking is that since he's already so good at that, even if he comes back a bit below, it's going to be there, and it should be a pretty smooth transition. Some of the more wonky transitions you see back from Tommy John are those guys who throw 100 and have no idea where it's going, and then they come back and there's just no clue where it's going. So it's going to be a long road for Hoagland. I think the Blue Jays, more than having this as a commentary on where the organization is, I think they just view this purely from a value standpoint as a guy who, if he was healthy, might have been that 8th or 10th-ish pick. And again, if this were another sport and you need the guy this year, well, that's pretty tough. Maybe if you're way out of it, you can be patient. But just given the nature of the MLB draft, maybe it does take him that 3.5 years as opposed to 2.5, like you'd hope. But I think they're confident just in the value of that. And eventually, it won't be fun for a year because it'll be maybe around this point next year when we see him back on the mound, ideally at a 13, 14-month range. But if he can come back and be the pitcher he was before, it's really good value. It just takes a while. And that's the thing I wish the MLB draft had, was that immediacy when you draft a guy first overall and he starts the next day. I think that's why it's a little tough to market as that exciting event, but long term, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
So, Keegan, I wanted to touch on just for a second here on, and I feel like you and I have been talking about this for years, but this whole player, the high performance department that the Blue Jays were super proud of when it first came to life. And I think even at the time, we've said, well, let's give it a few years to really assess, how effective it is. And I think we're at that point where we can start kind of, making some kind of statement, not definitive maybe, but in your mind, given how many injuries that this team continues to suffer, and I know it is across baseball, so it's tough to kind of just pin it on Toronto, but in your mind, how has this high performance department done, and are we really seeing any kind of evidence in that?
Yeah, I always go back to I believe Mark Shapiro said this, and I think Ross Atkins as well, both have, that their only regret is the name of it. Calling it the high performance department instead of just saying it's the medical department, right? It sets an expectation that there is some magic going on. And my answer when we talk about the high performance department is similar to when I was thinking of this the other day. It's similar to when people ask me about, for example, Pete Walker. How a lot of people do believe that Pete Walker is one of the very best pitching coaches in the game. And I have a ton of respect for Pete. I think he's an incredibly engaging, interesting, very smart pitching coach. But my answer when people ask me, does he have the magic touch, is that I cover one team. I don't know. And it's if I had covered 29 other pitching coaches and I really had a feel for that, I'd tell you. But I don't want my narrow focus bias to take over. But when we get to the Blue Jays and their injury woes, yeah, there are a few teams that are close to them. I know the Rays have had a terrible time this year, Yankees at some points, but the Blue Jays are near the top of the league, and they have a lot of nagging injuries, which is tough. Like a guy like Nate Pearson,
right,
where he is going for, what was it, like a 4th or 5th opinion on his groin. You don't get a second opinion if the first one was good, and you sure as hell don't get a 4th if the first 3 were good. So we'll see what direction that goes in, but when you see these lingering injuries for guys, it's it is worrying, especially now when young pitchers are coming up, all throwing 100, which the human arm was just not designed to do. So it's, I think some of the Blue Jays' problem from the start was, like the front office said, was just in the branding and naming of that. It did give out a message that there was some magic, which, teams now, it's, I always say that, the Moneyball era is over. Everyone's just fighting for an inch now. Nobody's finding that mile of advantage. But it's, if you are the Blue Jays, you would like it to be backing up. And especially, Sean, when we talk about younger players coming up now. Before you could say, well, Troy Tulowitzki came to Toronto with 100 injuries, so you're not going to fix that, right? But it is encouraging when I do look at Vladdy, look at Bo, look at these young guys who, I know Bo had a knee last year, a concussion you can't really plan on, but at least haven't dealt with anything too bad yet. And thankfully, we haven't seen too much like load management type of stuff this year. They've let them play, which is good. I know Vlad DH'd a lot last year, which was not always my favorite strategy. But it's it's a tough look, certainly when it's branded as something that is above and beyond, when it's really in a part of baseball where most teams are pretty close, pretty close.
Right. Do you see them looking to manage the workload of Alek Manoah?
Manoah will be the most interesting one, I think, because he is a guy who, I would not want to be the man who tells Alek Manoah we're slowing you down. He would, I'm very large, and I think he would break me in half. But Manoah's going to be the perfect example. And thankfully, teams now, it's not just about innings now. They're going to be looking at spin rates. Release point is a big one. If you see the release point starting to drop a few inches, that's kind of that canary in the coal mine where they really start to see a warning sign coming. But if anything, you ease him off maybe a bit. As strange as it might sound right now, I even see Alek Manoah as a potential bullpen option late in the season. Because if you want to keep him going a little bit, maybe he doesn't have all the innings to go all the way to the end, but if you shorten him up in one of those 2-3 inning roles, whether that's him, Pearson, Hatch, whoever it is, A, that works because they're good, and B, if you have a multi-inning guy that you really trust, not just going through sloppy multiple innings, but that you really trust, suddenly you're using 2 relievers instead of 4 or 5 in a game. So we'll see where Manoah is come that September-ish line, but I think him starting every 5th day, if he's going 6 or 7 innings, would be tough because he relies a lot on having his A game. Now, if Hyun-Jin Ryu does not have his A game, whatever. He'll feel his way around it and he'll spot his pitches. But Manoah is not a pinpoint guy whatsoever. He hits a lot of people. He misses the zone a lot, but he's very good at overpowering people. If he loses even 1% of that, all of a sudden those misses are a little more dangerous and that slider isn't moving as much. We've seen that in a couple of his outings, frankly, already. So he's a guy where if he starts to lose just a tick, you kind of start to worry and look at those options.
Yeah.
Right. So, Keegan, you mentioned earlier, and basically anybody who watches this team on a regular basis has noticed that sometimes they still struggle defensively, unfortunately. As a team, I agree they're better than they were last year. Vlad, it's just night and day with him, watching him play first base. They didn't have Marcus Semien last year, so overall they're better. But we've all seen that there are definitely room for improvement. What are they doing in order to improve both individually and as a team? I assume that they take regular fielding practice, but is there anything more to it? Do they have any coaches working specifically on people? We know that Semien used to be subpar defensively earlier in his career, and he remade himself into a good defender. So are they working in that way with any of the other current Blue Jays?
There's the normal work that goes in with infield drills, outfield drills. I'm always a bit of a believer that an outfielder might be more changeable, whatever the word is. It's been a long day. But that an outfielder, you can adjust their routes and their reads and their positioning a bit more, whereas an infielder is more about just immediate reaction. So you have to get those fundamentals underneath them. And, Bo Bichette, when somebody hits a ball 110 miles at him, he can't be thinking about what's my route, who am I calling off? He's just got to go immediately. So a lot about that is just really developing those physical skills. And that's what Charlie Montoya always talks about, is an error, a physical error, which you can tolerate, or a mental error. And we've seen some of those recently, like in Tampa Bay when Teoscar was a little relaxed, we'll call it, catching the ball, allowed the runner to advance. It's nitpicky, but that's just something the Rays don't do. That's something the Dodgers aren't going to do in October. And if you want to be a contender, you're not comparing yourself to 500 teams anymore. You have to compare yourself to the best. So there are the regular drills, but this is something where you don't see many breakouts defensively. Marcus Semion's an incredible example of that outlier when he just really turned it around and worked his way into a good fielder, which I admire so much because that's not easy, not nearly as common as an offensive breakout. But a lot of that needs to come from externally, I believe, too. Who was the third baseman on this team in August? Who was the third baseman in 2022? We'll see. The outfield has not been good enough. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. running back towards the wall has been adventurous at times. Still, that Gold Glove Award nomination of last year.
I think the throws are what
the
got
throws are outstanding. The highlight reel is brilliant. But you see a lot of the corkscrewing going back towards the wall that's a little tough. So you're still seeing the fundamentals. So they're better than last year, but man, oh man, there's a long way to go.
Yep.
Okay, I know, Keegan, that maybe a week or 10 days ago, you and the other AL East correspondents on MLB.com talked about what to look for the rest of the year in the division. So being the resident obnoxious American, I'm going to ask the typical American obnoxious question.
All right.
You have to write a story today,
Mm-hmm.
basically predicting the outcome of the Blue Jays at the end of the year. Are the Blue Jays a playoff team, yes or no?
I will lean just barely to yes in a wild card, probably sneaking in on that wild card race right now. And as we talk about it, I'm bringing up those standings right now on my phone just to look at the actual wild card race. Now, having them 4.5 back of Oakland, when you look at Toronto's roster, you look at Cleveland, Seattle, Oakland, they're a couple fixes away from being a lot better than those teams. I don't think the division is realistic at this point. If they storm back and win it, we're all going to come back and cut this audio out of the show. But I do see them making that wild card run because they're too talented at the top and their flaws are too blatantly obvious. Nobody is sitting here wondering, how do you fix the Blue Jays? It's very obvious. You clean up the defense a bit and you find a bullpen, and suddenly this is a really good team. So I think that simple path to getting better gets them on a path to that second wild card spot. But I don't think this is the year where they're making that big division run, and even making a second wild card run is a bit below what my expectations were for this team coming into the year, frankly. I know there's been injuries, et cetera, everyone does, but I thought they would be more of a contender in the division, certainly at this point. I mean, looking at 45 and 42, that's something that some average teams can pull off, and the Blue Jays aren't supposed to be average right now.
And in fairness, the Red Sox aren't supposed to be where they are either.
And that whatsoever. It's outstanding. Outstanding what they're doing. Man, oh man. Yeah, 55 and 36.
Yeah.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a lot of shows I wish I could cut my audio from back in March and April, let me tell you.
Well, it's funny you say that because Steve's got some audio that he wants to shout from the rooftops. Because
Love it.
Well, yeah, I figure I've done maybe 20 shows, so that's 1 out of 20 shows that I've got right. So, you know.
Broken clock and all that.
Yeah.
All right. Keegan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. As always, you're very generous with your time for an old friend, and I do appreciate that, brother. I wish you all the best. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll get you back on again.
Definitely. Happy to anytime. Thank you all for having me very much.
All right. Take care, buddy.
All right, yeah.
All right, so Keegan, what I enjoy having Keegan on the show because he will tell the truth. You know,
Yes.
he's not going to sugarcoat or whatever have you, and I appreciate that because I mean he's right. You know, the holes are glaringly obvious, and they're not performing where they were expected to. That being said, it's not all doom and gloom, right? So, Steve, I want to start with you, just very quickly.
Okay.
Keegan said they are a playoff team, or at least they will be by the end of the season. So, do you agree or disagree?
I still disagree.
Yeah.
Again, only because I don't see how the Jays are going to bring in enough, considering how many other teams are out there, really looking at the same type of players. I don't know that the Blue Jays can bring in enough at this point where it's going to push them past the A's or even the Indians. I just don't see it.
Interesting. Karen, I think your face says it all, but I'll throw it to you anyway.
I've been saying it all year, and I haven't changed my mind. The Blue Jays are a wild card team in 2021. I mean, it's going to be. I don't see them winning the division, but I see some similarities to 2015 in that. And I mean, Keegan was right. No, nobody wonders, well, what the heck do you do with the Blue Jays? Everybody knows where the holes are. They will go out. They will plug their holes. They will go on a run, not quite as good a run as 2015. You'll see, Steve. And they're going to be one of the wild card teams. How many other teams that are realistically in contention at all, like even on the fringes of being in contention this year, have money, luxury tax room, and a strong farm system? How many other than the Blue Jays? They're going to be right there. If there's something that they want, they aren't going to get outbid by 5 or 10 other teams.
They could get outflanked. But I mean, again, if everybody knows what the situation is, what is taking so long? They have the money and the muscle and the positioning. So why? And I know everyone's going to say, well, people don't really know what they're doing. But no. You have the money, and you make them an offer that they can't refuse.
They've made 2 good trades, and they're going to make more. There's at least one that's an impact move, more of an impact move that is still going to happen this month. You'll see.
And I think it's an interesting experiment to try and figure out and think along with the big league club, right? Because I think, for the most part, we all can guess that they're not going to just make an offer that they can't refuse, right? Because, it's just not in their nature. They're going to improve, and as Keegan said, whether it's a rent, I don't see it as a rental either.
Right.
But I think that they are, and rightly or wrongly, right? This is not an I agree or disagree with them, but they're not about to pay through the teeth for anything. They're not even going to do it for their own players. You know what I mean? If you think about lock Vladdy up for the rest of his career, well, they're not going to do that. They're not going to go out and do a Fernando Tatis type extension. Not now, because there's no need to, and they don't need to break the bank at this point. So I don't see them doing a 2015 type deal. Certainly not multiple, remaking 25% of their roster. I don't see that. Because they don't need to, and they don't need to overpay, which I think is what happens when you go just blow them out of the water to get what you want. That's all.
we were all fans of the Gord Ash era Blue Jays, so that's fine. We can live through that again. That's fine.
As long as it's not the JP Ricciardi years.
I don't think anybody could really survive that. I survived 4 years of Donald Trump. I can't go through another 4 or 5 years of JP Ricciardi type of stuff. I've already faced Armageddon and laughed at it. I don't want to tempt fate and go through it a second time.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be. You have nothing to worry about. Nobody's banging down his door to run their ball club. Anyway,
Believe it or not, he's a worse television commentator than he was a GM. I know that's hard to fathom, but he's on some obscure cable channel now, and he's just brutal. He makes JP Morosi seem like Abner Doubleday and John McGraw and every baseball genius you could think of.
All these JPs. Let's add Aaron Sabia while we're at it.
well, there's a good commentator though. I could listen to him. Anyway, we're just about out of time here, so we'll go around the table and let everybody know how they can follow you. Steve, we'll start with you. You've got the On Feck Circle tomorrow evening at 6.
I do. And since everyone seems to like when I play nice and talk about Blue Jays history, I'm actually going to come up with an all-time Blue Jays all-star roster. I'm going to look at all the Blue Jays that ever made the all-star team and try to come up with a, with a starting 9 and a bullpen guy. I think that's what I'm going to do. I just kicked off a new YouTube channel at US of Jays, so that because Facebook is just too tough to navigate. So we're going to try to do that. So if you're in the mood for just grumpy old men, check out and subscribe to US of J's YouTube channel.
And for the complete opposite,
yeah, perfect setup. Yes, this is
you could catch Sunny Side of the Dome Thursdays at 6. Karen, let everybody know how they can follow you.
Yes, so I'm on Twitter at Karen Sutar1, SOUTAR1, just like it says there on the screen. And I'm on Twitter a fair bit, so love to chat. Mutual respect is important. Baseball, other relevant topics. And Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursdays at 6 p.m. And I do tend to be on the positive side, particularly where the Jays are concerned. So, if you like positive, tune on in.
And I can't end the show without throwing these up here from Matt. Matt was watching on YouTube. First of all, he says he loves seeing Keegan. Thank you, Matt. We do too. And Matt says trade for Barrios, similar value to Stroman, and send them Simeon Woods, Richardson, and Anthony Kay. Oh boy, that is that's a bold idea, Matt. I don't know if the front office has the intestinal fortitude to go along with that idea.
No, we all know that they don't, but that is a great trade proposal, Matt. You keep thinking along those lines. You keep throwing that out there with us, and maybe we can make it happen. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Click our heel. There's no place like trades. No place like trades.
Oh my goodness. All right. Anyway, so that brings us to the end of the show, of course. Head to jaysfromthecouch.com for all of our Blue Jays coverage. Don't forget, every 6 p.m. Eastern time, you catch our live podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and all of that stuff. We're also on Instagram. Haven't quite figured out the benefit of that, but we're there. Whatever. And the audio version of this podcast, of course, everywhere you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find Jays from the Couch. So, for Keegan, for Karen, for the Feckless Wonder, this is Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.